Welcome to the Unspoken. I'm your host, Michael Brasher, leadership coach, men's work facilitator, and somebody who deeply believes that healing men is essential to healing our world. This show is where we go beyond surface level conversations and talk about the real stuff in our lives: masculinity, healing, power, pain, and what it means to show up in the lives of the people that we love. Today's guest is somebody that's really special to me, Aaron Scott. Aaron and I have been through some things together. What more can you or would you want to say about a relationship that makes it rich and that creates a lot of potential for a great conversation? We've had a lot of deep talks just about being dads, about being partners, about being socialized as men, about all the things that we had internalized that we didn't even know about. We've supported one another in a lot of unlearning and accountability. And so this conversation, I feel like, is something that is a long time coming and a long time in the works. So today we're going to talk about that journey. Aaron's going to share a lot about the stuff that he has learned. And we're going to talk about that process of becoming a husband, becoming a father, learning to confront our addictions, and doing the hard work of healing and repair. Aaron, thank you so much for giving us some time to talk today, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. You're welcome. It's an honor to share this space with you and sharing our stories and our dialogue in hopes that it would reach somebody, in hopes that it would help transform folks' thinking, help maybe create kind of accessibility to kind of this different learning. Maybe we can unveil some things today. And I love how you named, yeah, we've been through some stuff. And as that's always, I mean, yeah, any of my real, connections and relationships and areas of growth, they've come by
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Beautiful, man. Thank you. Well, so let's jump into it. I want to start, like I said, it's a shared journey that I know we both have talked about and can relate to. But to hear from you, can you take us back to a moment or a season when you first feel like you really meaningfully began to realize, hey, I've internalized some really harmful ideas about gender, control, emotions, and I don't want to pass that on. I'm becoming aware that some of the stuff I'm reproducing is not what I want to leave as a legacy for my family. Talk to us about that sort of awakening for yourself.
The biggest awakening and that where it really became crystal clear. I'm going to back up a little bit before it. I remember being like a teenager and I'm somebody kind of like gift of gab, kind of like, yeah, I can talk, you know, use my words. And I was reckless with them as a young man, as a teenager. And I remember some different relationships, romantic relationships that I was in, and the ways that I spoke to them, to the women that I was dating, I was so mean and so hurtful. And there definitely came an early kind of realization. It's like, yo, like you can't keep talking to people like this, man. Like you can't keep saying these terrible things because you're upset or because you're not getting your way or because you feel like you've been slighted. So there was this early like realization there, or at least like, yeah, you got to do something different. But here's where it kind of fast forwards to the actual awakening of like something went wrong because I ended up just trading in kind of one form of abuse for another. I'm not going to yell or call names or like be like this kind of degrading speech. I'm just going to, what I found out later was emotionally withhold. I'm just
Okay.
gonna sulk. Now, I thought I was being quiet. I thought I was keeping it to
Mhm.
myself and exercising self-control, but I was really withdrawing and withholding. And so I found that out in this class that I took in healing justice, where we were presented with an opportunity to look at a list. It was like a page, page and a half of violent and controlling behaviors. And when I looked at that list, and it was broken down into categories: psychological, physical, economic, these different pieces, right? And I'm
Yeah.
reading down the list, like, nope, don't do that. See, and I'll name the fact too that I took this class initially to audit the class. I called myself auditing the class. Okay, I'm gonna
Mhm.
learn some things. I'm not a controlling, violent person. I'm going to
Yeah.
learn some language, though. I'm going to learn some perspective so that I can teach about this more. That was my attitude walking in. But as I read this list, I'm like, no, that's not me. That's not me. That's not me. And then my number came up: emotionally withholding, sulking, withdrawing yourself in the name of being like quiet and keeping it to myself. And that, Michael, was like, it like rocked my world, man. It was paradigm shifting for me because I literally thought I was doing something better, but I had
Yeah.
merely traded one form of abuse for another. So I was like, whoa, I got a lot to learn.
Yeah, 100%. I have a follow-up question, but I'll say, I really relate to that. I think there was a time in my life where, and I could say like I was really abusive in my relationships with women. And when I say that, I just mean I acted the way men in our society are socialized to act to get their way with women, right? That's what I mean because I was really abusive, but I think sometimes people hear that. And like you said, right, we imagine it's this egregious behavior over here, but there's so many emotionally manipulative, punishing behaviors that we can engage in that are perfectly normal to a lot of people, right? That are really not okay. But I think that process of saying, like, oh, well, I've done these really unkind, hurtful, punishing things, and I don't want to do that. So the only way I know how to be safer, but still try to get my way is to use emotional withholding, icing out, right? I'll sulk so that she knows I'm not happy, so that next time he does what makes me happy, right? And that's still not adding up to being a safe partner. So talk to us, Aaron, about you have this realization like, oh wow, I am on this list. I do need to do work. I'm not auditing the class, right?
I love
So what was then the process from like something clicking up here, something disturbing you in a great way, something challenging you, to then that process of you sort of learning how to get to work? What has that been like for you?
especially on topics like this, but I think it goes across the board. I'm a big believer that like to learn how to do the thing, like you have to just start doing it. Like we had these exercises that we were able to practice, right? That we were invited to practice. And I'm going to use that language because healing is a choice. It's an invitation. We're doing this work right now. We're inviting men to look at themselves differently. I
Yeah.
was invited
Yeah.
to consider the way that I was behaving from a different perspective and see if
Yeah.
there might be something different there. So I accepted the invitation. I dove into the assignment. So one would be, it was like this, it's called a check-in.
Yeah.
And we were invited to consider where there had been some type of like altercation or conflict
Mhm.
or something came up from that list, right? I behaved
Yeah.
in something that was on that list. And I really taken this approach of rigorous honesty, using this phrase that I believe that I heard from you. And it was, the truth in me is all I see. So
Mm.
looking at this issue, looking at myself, and then walking through. So it'd be like, okay, who are the people involved? What happened? Give like a brief synopsis of like the event, and then talk about what I did and how I showed up. And not only how I showed up, what I said, what I did, but also talk about what I was thinking and why I like really walk through the process. As I began to do that earnestly, I started to see patterns in myself. And the patterns that I was seeing were in alignment with, again, this list of abusive behaviors. Again, the list that I didn't think I was on because I didn't put my hands
Totally.
on people. I
Right.
didn't I didn't do a lot of like name calling, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But oh, acting like the authority
Yeah.
or breaking down this gaslighting or breaking down
Yeah.
arguments with logic,
Yeah.
trying to fix it instead of feel it, that doesn't make me a safe man. It doesn't make me a
Yeah.
man of peace. And it's ultimately not the type of husband and father that I want to be. So it was like doing that work, doing it in earnest. And
Yeah.
then, yo, getting in the circle and sharing it with other men. Because I'm like, there's times, listen, I'm like, I nailed that assignment. Come on. I put my stuff down here. Oh, I'm healed. I'm healed, y'all. Listen,
Yeah.
give me a couple
Yeah.
more. I'm gonna be good. And
Yeah.
then you start reading it, and then the brothers are like, hey, thank you for naming what you did, but I'd also invite you to look at this, this, and this. And it was like, oops. So doing it in earnest, but then also being vulnerable and transparent with
Yeah.
a group of trusted brothers so that we could work through it together.
Yeah.
That was tremendously helpful, and that's what it looked like for me.
Beautiful. A few things I hear in that, right? Like, one, I let myself get put on the hook. I let myself get caught. It's a big piece of advice I throw out a lot, man, is like get caught. Getting caught is helpful. Getting away with it
Mm.
is not helpful, right? Like you saw yourself on the list. You let yourself be seen by yourself on the list, right? And then I hear like taking like an active curiosity, becoming interested in your accountability to others. Like I hear you began to comb through your interactions, right, with a fine-tooth comb. And then not only that, but expose that work and that learning and understanding in community. Like, guys, this is what I saw myself do this week. Do y'all have feedback? Do y'all see me doing this, right? And I think that component, in our self-help kind of age and era, yeah, men's work has to be in community. I really feel that. So many times I'm trying to do my men's healing work in my own lane, and I think I'm killing it, and I'm not. I'm not killing it, right? I'm being self-congratulatory or whatever. Let me ask you one more question on this, because I think this is an important part to name. I notice a lot of conversations lean out of this part of it. What did you learn about your own internalized misogyny in that process, if you feel comfortable talking about it?
I have a religious background, and so a lot of the unhealthy, for example, there's a Christian, when I'm saying religious,
Yeah.
I'm talking about like biblical background. So there are verses that talk about men's and women's relationship, husband and wife relationship. And there are so many times when there will be like literally like a little paragraph or a couple sentences, and it would be like, husbands, show up like this, wives show up like this. But oftentimes it's like, forget the first part, like forget how I'm supposed to show up. She is supposed to show up like ABC. There were areas in my life where I was doing that. And I was placing more
Yeah.
emphasis on how she is supposed to show up and less emphasis on how I was supposed to show up, and basing it on like using this text to back it up. And it became very internalized for me because I find a lot of my identity in my faith. And so, here I am being dishonest because I'm really only taking part of the story. I'm only taking part of the lesson and saying, I got it from here. That those are ways that I internalized it. That was a big way for me. And I think another I could probably name just in terms of like definitely viewing myself as a leader, viewing
Yeah.
myself as strong, viewing myself
Yeah.
as responsible, as intelligent, but holding that in such a way that I become now disingenuous towards
Yeah.
others to where I assume that they are less knowledgeable or less, able, less willing, that they're less than I
Yeah.
am. And that I have to check that daily because now I'm here to, and I love the expression you said, the fine tooth comb, going
Hmm.
through the meticulous,
Yeah.
painstaking
Big
about this
time.
examination, because some of that I do think is good. I want to be a
Yeah.
strong leader. I want to be
Of course.
a healthy, a confident father,
Yeah.
but I don't want me being strong and lifted up. It cannot happen at the
Yeah.
expense of somebody else being put down or stepped
Yeah.
on. So those were a couple places where it was internalized and I have to examine it closely.
Yeah, man. No, I really appreciate that reflection, and I just feel like it's so good, for whatever men will like witness this conversation. As men, like I needed to witness other men who I could see myself in, who I cared about, who I wanted to see myself in, say, "Hey, I've been socialized to think less of women. I've been socialized to disrespect women." Right. And I think just like I'm just saying thank you for like being willing to like name a part of that for yourself. I think when we're socialized in a community that has the tacit, implicit, subtle belief, historical belief that women need to be controlled and that real men control women. It's kind of like when all you got is a hammer, everything is a nail, right? And it's like you have that going on, your faith's gonna confirm that for you, like whatever it is, like her personality is going to confirm that for you. And so it's been so important in my journey to just say like, man, I'm not behind it. I'm not proud of it. I'm not about it. But deep within me, I've been socialized to believe that I'm better than women, to believe as a white person that that makes me better than people of color, right? I've had these things socialized because if I can say that, if I can tell that truth, then the odds are I'm going to be more conscientious in my relationships, right? But if I'm still at that place where I'm like, no, I don't hate women. I don't disrespect women. Like, not me, couldn't be me. We see that there's a lot of men that are in that place. And because of that, they haven't really been able to become safe yet.
Michael, I'm just thinking about like in any other context, a proper examination, right? To really do some fact finding before we start to do whatever we're gonna do is duh, right? It's like if you're gonna
Yeah,
let's talk about a house, you're gonna do like some
yeah,
structural changes. Well, we're gonna bring out the appraiser, we're gonna check the roof, check the foundation, check all these things, right? And I
yeah,
want to make sure you know what the heck is going on there. I was just
yeah,
thinking
yeah,
about you're getting ready to go to your doctor and like you tell them like, hey, like I don't feel so good, and they're like, oh, you don't feel good? Oh, you're fine. Like, or just take this or do that. And wait, are you going to examine me? Are you going to
yeah,
bring me in? Do you have any
yeah,
further questions? But of course, it's so much harder to look at ourselves and to put myself under the
yeah.
microscope. But the growth that can come from it, unlike anything else in my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, and it's getting out of the man box, right? To use that language because the man box, all these stereotypes, the be in control, the know things, be dominant with women, never let your guard down, make everybody see you in a certain kind of way, always be one up, That if we just lean in with no sense of irony, like those are my rules, I've got to try to do that every day. All of that stacks against growing and transforming, right? And what the process you described for yourself is courageous, it's gutsy in the best way, right? It's humiliating. You and I have done humiliating work in our lives, and which is a good thing, right? It's why
Mhm.
we can be dads that are more integrated because we had to look at things and just say, yeah, it breaks me apart. Then I'm going to let myself understand that this is how I've been acting. But if I'm just living under the hammer of always seem like you had it all figured out, it's never going to be safe for me to open up my consciousness to that, right?
Man, there's a different type of work that happens when we stop running away from the
Yeah.
discomfort. Another expression, man, that you shared that resonates with me so deeply, and I share it often. Like, will we be willing to look at the things that we don't want to see? And that's a choice, that's an invitation as well.
Yeah.
And I know how uncomfortable that is. I know how messy that can get. I know how literally it's going to like unravel. It unraveled part
Yeah.
my life. It literally pillars that were erected in my like understanding and framework of the world came tumbling down. And that was scary, difficult, left me feeling literally like naked, like out in the open, but I was still standing. And if you're willing to stay the course through that unraveling and undoing,
Yeah.
there can be a reconstruction and a rebuild. And I
Yeah.
suggest that it is far beyond what you could really ask for or imagine. The
Yeah.
intimacy that I find with my wife today, and the thing is, I'll save it if it comes back up, but the intimacy that I have with her today
Yeah.
is beautiful, and it's from a it's a different kind of strength. I'm not getting walked over. I'm not just anything she says
Yeah.
goes, like
Yeah.
kind of thing, like the rhetoric of
Yeah.
what, like
Yes. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not people try to say like simp or simple or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever the
Yeah.
heck.
That's
I'm
right.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's the farthest thing
Yeah.
from it. I
Yeah.
deeply and complexly understand and respect her feelings and am strong enough to stay there and hold space for them and feel them with her
Yeah.
while we navigate through. And I
Yeah.
can do the same with mine. And
Yeah.
that has transformed our relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's just, it's a poverty of imagination. If the only thing I can imagine is power and control, then the entire like healthy masculinity, healed manhood movement, all of that stuff, what you imagine is victimizing yourself. And there's a lot of men living and dying on the internet and in their lonely ass lives, all due respect, and I genuinely say it with compassion, but they are because they're just like, well, if my choice is to like dom or be a victim, then I'm just going to dominate everybody. And I love, Bell Hooks, I know is somebody we share and love. And she said, man, you can have domination and you can have intimacy, but you can't have them both. So it's up to you. You get to choose. And that's not a lesson I got from my dad. And I broke myself along that truth for a long time. But when I stopped being afraid of the intimacy, stopped fearing that the intimacy was victimization, what I found there was wild richness, right? The kinds of stuff that gets us through this hard and challenging life. It's the deepest medicine for men, which is why we're having this important conversation. Let me pivot us. Can I do that?
Please.
Because something else that we share, which one of the reasons I was so excited to have this conversation, is recovery work, right? And something I am so interested in, and I don't see enough of it, you know? Bell Hooks said it. She said, hey, if patriarchal manhood were truly satisfying, you wouldn't see the rates of violence in families you see and the rates of addiction in men. And there's a lot of literature that says, man, if you actually look at like all the drinking, using, addictive behavior of men, what makes the most sense is that they're coping with stereotypes about how their identity has to express itself that, pardon my French, fucking suck. They suck and people don't enjoy it. And so we have to medicate. Anyways, I'm not diving in with all this
Oh,
context, but I would love to hear about your story, how you came to be conscious of the hunger that lived underneath the addictiveness.
man. So just, quickly echoing the point about the internal conflict that in the past, like struggled with because I'm looking to adhere to these stereotypes that are false. Like they're false paradigms. It's not real. We're just made for so much more. And there's such a deeper level of intimacy and connection and relationship between man and woman. But the stereotypes that we're told and how to show up as a man that we're told, they're not true. And so when we try to fit ourselves into it, the deepest part of ourselves knows that it's like, yo, this software is outdated. That's why it's incompatible, but you're trying to force it. And then you talked about a hunger for it. You know what it is? It's connection. It's connection, me being aligned with myself, with higher power, with the world around me, however you want to put that. I was for so long looking for it in the wrong places. But I could say for my, talking about my story of like addiction, it was definitely like avoidance. It was so much about avoidance, trying to like avoid feelings I didn't want to feel, avoiding reality in myself that I wasn't really showing up the way that there was so much, my life was terribly incongruent, right? Like my internal actual value systems and beliefs, and then how I behaved. But I operated like that for so long because it was normal, because on the outside it looked good, right? And I was getting support and reinforcement and I was getting incentives and I was
Yeah.
doing the things. But I remember being like, again, like teenager, like, and there's probably a few times throughout my life I remember like laying there by myself and just being like, yo, like I am not doing it right, like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I would have those late conversations with myself and I would get up and keep going back and doing the same thing. But for me, yeah, so long it was about this avoiding. So I struggled with addiction around lust, addiction around marijuana, addiction around alcohol. And this little conglomerate for me was
Yeah.
diabolical because they would just literally, it was a tag team. One would
Yeah.
take the lead and the other two cronies would be right there ready to come, or vice versa. And any one of the substances, vices could be my downfall. I'm getting ready to go run a race and it's like I'm strapping weights
Yeah.
on my feet. It's like I'm putting on the weighted vest and everybody else is just going out to train. But at a young age, I got introduced to kind of like unhealthy sexual relationships. There's a little girl in my neighborhood. She was a little bit older than me, and she was taking us behind the trees and fondling us and trying to get guys and other kids. So she was almost like a ringleader. Hey, y'all do this, y'all do that. And
Hmm.
for so long, I kept that secret. It,
Right.
it made me feel special. It made me feel cool. I feel like I'm experienced. I have something, with this person. I'm lying about it. I'm hiding it. I'm planning for ways to do it. I'm starting to develop the early stages of like, these like addictive behaviors and
Yeah.
habits. Yeah, creating
Hmm.
the environment in my heart and mind that allow addiction to really germinate and
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
blossom. That starts going on. Then around early, probably sixth, seventh grade, I get introduced to marijuana, start smoking marijuana basically regularly. Shortly thereafter, drinking alcohol. and then other drugs, would be introduced, more experimental, but the sex, the drugs, and the alcohol were like mainstays. I was hungry for any kind of connection, and so I would turn to the place where I was accepted. I dealt with
Yeah.
what I felt like was rejection at home.
Hmm.
My response was rebellion, and so I went towards the things that my parents told me I ought not to do.
Yeah.
And here I am thinking that I'm like finding my medicine, but I was really taking poison to myself. On the lust side, it ultimately like crippled my ability to have a real intimate connection because everything was
Yeah.
transactional. Everything was what can I get? How can
Yeah.
I get it to get what I
Yeah.
want?
Yeah.
I was manipulative.
Yeah.
I lied. I, pretended to have interest, would talk about a future, would
Yeah.
do all these things.
Yep.
um, Invest hours and hours, right? Back in the day when we used to just talk on the phone or like be on
Hmm.
AOL Messenger or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Chatting, talking the whole nine, hanging
Yep.
out, doing all
Yep.
this stuff. All I want to do though is have some type of sexual
Yeah.
encounter with drinking and smoking. For me, it was a getaway. I'm
Hmm.
having hard feelings I don't want to deal with. What I
Yeah.
realized as I look back is so many of my friends, I have many friends that are not here today that I ran
Yeah.
in those circles with that have yeah, expired as a result of a use of
Yeah.
substance. But I recognized we were all in so much pain and we were
Right.
all getting away from it together because we would get together,
Yep.
we get high and we start drinking and we're laughing and we're watching
Yep.
movies and we're
Yeah. Yeah.
skateboarding and
Right.
but we're not dealing with the stuff that we're dealing with. And when we
Right.
left from there, we all had to go back home to our situations.
Yeah.
And it's wild to reflect on it now
Yeah.
because friends that were at broken homes, parents separated, friends that were dealing with abuse. I recognize now, I'm like, yo, how is it that we were able to be at some of our friends' houses every day after school? We could chill at your house all day long and do everything. Dang, because your
Right.
parents are absent. That's what that actually means. There's
Right.
no one here for and with you guys. Like, what's going on? So I'll pause there
Yeah.
for now.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing about it, and I think part of it, right, there can be so much shame around our addictions. And then of course, like that's the cycle because it precludes us from talking about it. And when I don't talk about it, that's when I'm at risk. That's when I'm less safe. I think about in my own life, just reflecting on some of what you shared, I'm an alcoholic. I can't drink. And what I would say is like people say like you have a drinking problem, right? And you hear people say, well, like it's a drinking solution. And I really like to say that actually. I think that's really helpful to say because it's important to understand I'm solving a problem I have in my life. I'm probably solving it poorly. Yeah, eventually I'm solving it in a way that creates even more problems than if I just did nothing. But it is, right? We have things that are hurting, that are frightening, that there's a sadness, that there's guilt, right? There's a lack of meaning, right? Maybe it's just because like I am socialized, for example, as a man to like be really selfish, to be selfish in my relationships with women, to try to use them to get what I want, all that stuff, right? So I'm living out the playbook I inherited. The part of me, some part, it might be remote, it might be small, it might be quiet, is sad about how I'm behaving. I do feel guilty on some level. There's a consciousness there. So how am I going to cope with that? Well, it's bothering me, but I actually have something I can do that helps me forget about that. Right. And so the drinking, the substances, it can help us to just lean in to this caricature of what we wish our life were: control, carefree, unaffected, stoic, can use women and doesn't care, doesn't ever feel guilty or ashamed about it. The substances can help me cope with the fact that that actually on some deep part of my soul doesn't really work for me as a human being. And so I think, I support sometimes I support men in recovery. I mean, a lot of times what I'll tell people is like, hey man, the main problem for you is that drinking or whatever it is actually preventing your problems from flowering over, right? From overcoming you, which is what we need, right? I need to tarry with that
Mm.
guilt. I need to tarry with the fact that this is not good enough for me, that I don't like what's going on in my life. But the problem is, I actually feel fine if I drink enough, often enough, or whatever, if I smoke enough, often enough, right? And so I think I'm not one of those people that says, "Oh, everyone's an addict, everyone's an alcoholic, nobody can drink." Or, like every people are different. Not everybody does what I do. I don't think that. But I will say for men who are trying to do that healing work, where toxic masculinity is about disconnection, disconnect from self and others. And that's really the roots of addiction, right? It is feeling disconnected. And we go to substances to try to feel connected to self and others. And so I think that place of being like, you know what, I need recovery. There's this just strong relationship between recovering in our masculinity and recovering from our addiction. So I'm just sharing all that, man, and would love to hear your reflection on that, and anything else that you feel like maybe like people don't understand about recovery.
Man, I love how recovery, I think of restoration, because if I'm saying that I'm feeling disconnected, one way to look at that is like there was a connection at some time or that there is a connection available. And so we want to restore that, we want to reconcile that. And even if it's like I have a connection with a higher power, but even if it's a connection like a man within himself, for so long I had these dueling thoughts, drives within myself. And until I really like sat with them, like you said, tarry with them. Let's just be here and see what's going on. And one of those like goofy things like the five whys, like, like, oh, well, why do you feel that? And why do you want that? And why do but really examining myself. I think one of the things that is misunderstood. I mean, I had a fella say the spiritual part of the program is like the wet part of the ocean. And
Right. Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think that's something that's misunderstood is that it is such like a spiritual program, but it is also but it's not religious. It's literally every
Mm.
single step is God as you understand God.
Yeah. Hmm.
So folks talk about the group being their higher power. They talk
That's
about a
right.
higher power being their higher power. You have folks from different, religious
Mhm.
backgrounds and
Yeah.
tradition and
Yep.
discipline. But what it is that something like outside of myself, even if I just say that it's an ideal that I'm able to strive for and be held accountable to. And accepting, at least to start, that like this substance or this
Yeah.
behavior is keeping me from getting there. So I'm going to
Yeah.
name one thing, right? It's like this
Yeah.
substance is keeping me from getting there. So
Yeah.
let me start working around that. And from that
Yeah.
place, now too, I want to like really break down for folks that it's literally a process, like these 12 steps, like it's neat because a step is a noun and a verb, you know, it's
Hmm.
something that you have to do. It's also a
That's
place
right.
to arrive at. Cliches are all coming out now, trudging the road of happy destiny. But I think, walking through, and I think one thing that stood out to me that was really, really powerful was recognizing, like, even let's say, like, within the first three steps, it's neat because
Yeah.
it's getting you to a specific purpose, but it
Yeah.
literally, like, builds it kind of precept by precept. Like, first, it's like, I'm going to accept and acknowledge. I liked what you said earlier. I'm going to let myself get caught. I'm going to let
Right.
myself go on the hook. You know what?
Yeah.
I drink too much and I'm messing stuff up. Okay.
Yep.
If I
Yeah.
can accept that, right? That's the first thing. So let's do that. Then the next thing is saying, hey, you know what? Boom, I messed up. I'm this, all that. Yeah, I'm in a bad spot. But there's something, there is help available. I don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers people will give you, but there's something. Okay, so
Yeah.
now I'm in a bad spot and there is something that can help. And then the
Yeah.
next part, the third step is, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to trust that there is something that can help me and I'm going to turn over my will or I'm going to like work to, yeah, like discipline myself to
Yeah.
adhere to the principle or the value and go against like how I want to do it. And for me,
Yeah.
what's ingrained in that is, can I accept the fact that like my thinking, my reasoning is what got me here today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I accept that? And also
Yeah.
to, and like, and that it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, if I want to get better, I got to be willing to not be good. There's an infancy
Yeah.
phase of
Yeah.
everything. But I like how that, and then the next portion is now, well, now that I recognize there's something wrong, there is something that can help. I'm gonna try this. Going to earnestly give it a shot. Then it says, okay, well now let's take an earnest look at ourselves and some of the areas we're going to do this like house cleaning. What are some of the
Yeah.
grievances that I hold and resentments and frustrations?
Yeah.
And you walk through that process. And I'm not going to go through all 12 right now, but you walk through and you say, okay, what am I resentful about? What really
Yeah.
grinds my gears? You know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, and then
Yeah.
why? And that's okay. Let's examine that. Why? You know? And then what did it do to me? But then we get to the point of, and now what part did I play in that? And that is when, man, you again, as I did this, I started to see patterns. I was like, damn. So I bring a particular attitude and belief system and way of responding in a lot of different places. And I
Yeah.
ultimately I end up the same place too. Interesting, you know? And I definitely want to hold space for the fact that not everything that we've gone through that we dealt with is it our fault in any way. Do we have
Sure.
any responsibility in it? Okay, let's talk about abuse and neglect and
Of course.
undue harm, right? Like, so
Yeah.
absolutely. um and at the same time, there are I found in my life that there was also a number of places that I had a big old part to play in it,
Yeah.
a big old part to play.
Yeah.
And that's what I can change. And if
Yeah.
and when I'm willing to change those things, I can transform myself.
Yeah.
And by transforming myself, I can transform the dynamics and the people that I'm
Yeah.
connected to,
Yeah.
because it's a cycle. We
Yeah.
feed off of each other. And if you change something in that cycle, then the cycle will change. Couple of things that I think are misunderstood about recovery that were paradigm shifting for me, and that I definitely will carry the message and try to invite people in. My heart was so full of pain and darkness that I did not have any room to carry the things that my wife would bring to me. I also had nothing to offer to her except for frustration and dissatisfaction, and the fact that can't she see that I'm already up to my eyeballs in sugar honey iced tea? And now how am I supposed to help her with hers? Because not only am I too overwhelmed to deal with it,
Yeah.
also the sick thought that your stuff doesn't even matter because it's less than what I'm dealing with. And if it was
Right.
that whole thing. But when I started to get some healing, when
Yeah.
I started to get restoration and experience recovery, my heart began to get cleaned out. I was able to unpack, I was able to
Mm.
remove, I was able to release a
Yeah.
lot of the pain and the shame and the hurt and the guilt. And then I was able to show up for her differently. And when I showed up for her differently, then she was able to show up for me differently. And we were able
Exactly.
to experience a whole new thing. And it started
Yeah.
with me. And there were times when I was able to just hold space, but there was also times now when I was able to lend my peace.
Yeah.
I was able to lend my insight. I was able to lend my calm, my love. And it's neat because I really appreciate the rhetoric around like, yo, like when women ask the question, like, well, so what do we need men for? You know, and then guys come back with like, well, provide, protect, and like, you know, the standard like things. And they're like, yo, I can do
Mhm.
all that for myself. Like, yes. I think it's neat what we have to offer as partners one to another in an intangible way, though. I can offer you peace. I can help protect your heart and mind sometimes, and she can do the same for me. But that comes from the person has to be in a
Yeah.
healing place to be
Totally.
able to offer that.
Yeah, man, I love it. I think you hit on some really beautiful, important insights there, man. I hope people don't miss, the part of just like if I don't know how to care for this hurting self, it can't be useful to others. That's kind of a devastating fact because if I could describe the socialization process of boys and men in the United States today through any one factor, I'd say principally it is to be trained not to take care of your pain, right? And then what do we see when we look at like toxic masculine internet culture? Hating feminism, hating feminists, hating women. All they can say is like, "Don't die too hurt, don't die too hurt." That's like all they can literally say. They're screaming it into their keyboards all day long, right? And like, brother, you do hurt, but we need you to actually learn how to do something with that pain other than pointing fingers, to actually care for it and metabolize it into virtue so that we can show up and actually hear and love the women in our lives who are telling us about some pretty serious and real problems that they need our buy-in on. But so many men are just jamming up because they're like, well, I'm hurting too, so I don't have space for that, right? A few things I want to hit on that you said, that whole part of like it's spiritual work. And I think that's an important distinction. What makes it spiritual work versus intellectual work? There's a volume of men out here. I've been him sometimes doing intellectual work on oppression. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't mean shit to my community, to be honest, because I need to be doing accountability work. And that's so different. I'm not reading a book to learn about a concept. Accountability work is about being ferocious in the mirror and then going to my community and telling them the truth about what I'm seeing and witnessing about what they're telling me that I'm hearing them. It's a very different thing. And if you look at men's work in the process you described at the beginning of our conversation, hey, I began to look through my life with a fine-tooth comb and then come back and share it with the brothers. And you look at recovery work, I took a fearless, searching moral inventory. I wrote it down, everybody who had harmed me and how I was resentful, everybody I'd harmed. I began to make amends as much as was possible. This is really different. Yeah, that is spiritual work. That is self work. The thing I think about with the higher power, I've heard it put this way. It's really helpful that if nothing else, the most important step about that higher power angle to recovery work is just like get Michael off the throne. I don't care who you put up there. Just make that guy realize it's not him. And so that's why in my life, I need that as a regular practice because a lot of days I wake up as this guy's in the throne. He knows the most. He's the funniest. He's the smartest. He's the cleverest. He's the only one that cares. He's the only one that tries. Loads of bullshit, in other words, right? But I wake up and it's there. And so much of that, like just coming to the universe and saying, I need help. My own best thinking and decision making leads me sometimes into things that are harmful. I need help. It's that positive humiliation, like come down from where you were deceiving yourself, perceive yourself with much more true vision so that you can come into community. That's the piece I want to talk to you, sort of the last piece I want to hit on here, right? The difference is the practice of accountability. When I look at recovery work at its best, when I look at men's work at its best, it's learning how to be in accountable relationships, to crave even accountability eventually, which can be so scary. And so let me start here and take it wherever you want. But I think about, for me, one of the features of mainstream masculinity when it's not super healthy in our society is a terror around accountability, an absolute phobia for accountability. And in so much of my work with Minute, that's like one of the principal foundational places it comes down to. To me, it's what you said, right? That's where the work begins. And so talk about how we can practice accountability without collapsing into shame. And maybe speak a little bit on your own journey of learning how to do one without living in the other.
Beautifully put. Take this guy off the throne. Yeah, come on. And that's an act of humility, that's accepting the invitation. Again, fellas, this is an invitation. This is for your growth. Should you decide, should you accept the mission? That's, that's what this is. Humility is the secret sauce. Because when I'm no longer on the throne and I need to be accountable to whoever or whatever is, and that connection and your humility before that, whatever it is, whoever it is, and being accountable to that or to them is what now is going to give you a framework to work from and to build from. I had a mentor say to me, it's like, you know what, at the end of the day, man, he's like, you have to have your own plan. And then
Mhm.
this way, regardless of what's going on around you, like, what you're working on. You know already where you're falling short because you had a plan. you can find a plan one way with this conversation is in that accountability because there are expectations, because there are standards, because there are 12 steps and 12 traditions, for example, or there's codes of conduct. And if you begin to, learn those things and study those things and apply those things, you're going to know when you're missing, regardless of the feedback you're getting. You're probably going to get feedback that confirms when you
Right.
should have zagged there, bud.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
but it's not, you're not telling me anything I didn't know, and it's not me against you. I'm
Yeah.
out of alignment and you are
Yeah.
helping me see that. And I
Yep.
gave you the evidence
Yeah.
for that. And now I'm
Yeah.
mad at you for having
Yeah.
eyes and seeing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's also beautiful too because I didn't respect myself, man. I didn't love myself. I was situationally moral. I would reason and logic my way. I would justify. I would swap out tactics. I could go in my bag of tricks and pull out any type of BS and nonsense. As I accepted the fact that, like, I let myself get caught, I recognized that I wanted to do better. I got myself off the throne. I began to strive, stay rigorously honest, surrender the outcome. The other thing about accountability is I'm accountable to this and I'm adhering to these principles. I don't necessarily know that I'm going to like get what I want, like that this is going to go the way, whatever that means that I want it to go, that
Yeah.
my will is going to come to pass. But I know that if I do this in earnest, whatever is supposed to happen will happen and surrendering that outcome. I remember, man, I was in the playground, my son was playing. I was listening to Bill Withers' Lovely Day. I love that song. And I'll listen to it often, and different people will come to mind. Kids would come to mind, wife would come to mind, different things would come to mind. Sometimes I would come to mind. And I got myself out of there real quick because that I couldn't, because I knew deep down inside, even though I was trying to get there in the light, I was like, I knew that there's so much that I've done wrong. So many
Right.
times I've been out of alignment. I couldn't in
Right.
earnest hold myself there. But I started to develop in that moment. I'm listening to the song. I'm steeped in my recovery work. I'm experiencing this restoration. I'm humbling myself. I'm making changes. I'm doing work. I was able to hold myself in just one look at you, and I know it's going to be okay. You're turning your ship around right now. You know where you've been and where you came from and all the dirt you've done, but you're getting better now. You were rigorously honest. You brought the stuff up in your circles with your sponsor, with your wife, the stuff that could have like slid by, but it was still eating you up inside. And you decided to lean in and be honest about it. And you've gotten free from those things. Yo, I started to love myself, man, and respect myself in a way that I never have. And from that place now, I have a voice, and not one that I need to assert, or not. No, I do need to assert it, but not that I have to impose on others. Y'all don't have to believe what I believe. This is what I believe. This is what's real for me. I'm able to be authentic in that place. And then I'm also able to be secure and listen to what you think. Share with me. I can hear you. I can understand you. I can put myself in your shoes. I might agree, I might not. And I'll tell you why. And then we can keep on going down the road. But I couldn't get there until I was able to love myself, respect myself. Because if you're saying something that's going against me and what I'm doing, that's a slight, that's an attack. I need to,
Right. Right.
back to the stuff I was socialized. Oh no, that ain't gonna
Yep.
happen. Oh no, we
Yeah.
not doing that. Oh, not around here. Oh, what do you mean? That's a terrible idea. How could you think that? How could you act like that?
Yeah.
Right? So, talk about accountability, talk about having a plan, talk about humility, talk about self-respect and self-love that says, I'm going to keep showing up to do the best I can. I recognize, and I love it too, man. We say, right? What we say in the rooms, like, I'm not a saint. What's the point? We're making progress along spiritual lines, making progress. It's not perfection, it's progress. If I'll show up every day and do that, some days are better than others. And I'll tell you, even when I mess up, because I still do, and I go to my wife and I use a cool little, cocktail of a check-in and an accountability and making amends and naming these things, man, it restores that connection too, because that's what happens with us in my home, in our hearts, in our family, in our marriage. Our hearts start to get disconnected. It might have been a conflict, it might have been whatever, it might have been a word, it might have been a look,
Yeah.
it might have been
Yeah.
a response, and our hearts start to go in different directions.
Yeah.
I'm chasing that connection.
Hmm.
And so by naming the things, by being accountable, by respecting and loving myself enough to say, no, like I don't want to stay here. I don't want to stay disconnected from you, babe. I messed up. This is what happened. This is where I was at. This is how I showed up. And that's not what I want to do. And own it and then get back up on it and be like, and also like that's not me. Like I had a moment and I'm gonna come and tell you. And then next I'm gonna say, hey, like, so you want these pancakes still or what? Like kind of thing, Keep
Yeah.
showing up a few
Yeah.
minutes later. Don't let that.
Right.
Because when I was in that hurt place, man, that's a moment for me to now go roll something up or,
Right.
or go say I'm going to the store when I'm really going to the
Hmm.
bar. Oh, you need any
Yeah.
Target pickup so I can go take a 30-minute mission and turn it into a 3-hour like chill session. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I think just like it's interesting that relationship between accountability and shame because I think what's funny is doing one always keeps us out of the other, you know? It's like when I'm really unaccountable, the times in my life I've been so unaccountable, like, no, I didn't. You did that. No, you're totally misunderstanding me, right? Defense, 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 defense. It's coming from fear. Right? There's a lot of fear, might be some latent guilt, and that guilt and fear, of like, well, I have done things wrong. I have all this stuff, like whatever. It creates this pressure to like not let it in. And I talk to men and they're like, well, if I like let that in, I'm afraid I'm going to be powerless. Like she's going to bully me, like I'm going to lose all control. But it was when I found myself in scenarios where I had to be accountable, I had to learn to start practicing accountability,
Yeah.
that the more I did it, the shame went way down. The sense of personal power, what I hear you speaking to, came up. I was like, oh, I'm just a guy who's doing my best, who definitely does messed up stuff all the time and does wrong stuff all the time. But I deserve grace like everyone else. I'm on a learning journey, and I want other people to expedite the journey by helping. It's just like meditation, right? Meditation isn't not getting lost in thoughts, it's getting better at catching yourself being lost in thoughts. Those are the moments I'm meditating, or the moments when I was like, oh, I was caught in my thoughts, right? That's the moment where it kicks in. And so accountability is that, right? The shame goes way down, when I start turning to the people in my life and say, hey, what's one thing, that I could shift in our relationship that would improve things for you? What's one thing I could do? And just start asking that, the sense of healthy control I have in my life and my relationships. And what you're saying, right, is it brings so much trust, right? I will also hear men say like, well, I'm afraid if I like tell the truth about this stuff, like people won't want to be close to me. And I'm like, buddy, they already know or feel half of it, and it's a part of the reason they're not closer to you. The moment
No.
that you stop your own bullshit lie con action on the whole thing and say like, hey, the way I talked to you yesterday was so rude. I know it was rude. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that. I'm embarrassed about how I talked to you, and I'm embarrassed that I'm having to bring it up right now. That is actually the moment in which people like, wow, I really trust you. I really feel connected to you because you were willing to say the thing that was obvious anyways. And so there's just this part, man, where shame keeps us out of accountability. But if we can hold our nose, have some faith, try it anyways, we're gonna find like, oh, the shame's going down and the closeness and richness is going up.
You talked about accountability and like embracing it, right? Like asking that question, like, hey, what could I work on? Man, I had a shift like pretty recently in therapy with my wife around like, just the defensiveness just started to fall away. They just became opportunities for me to show up and do better, and like it's an age old kind of illustration of to refine a precious metal. it has to be heated, put in the furnace so the impurities come to the top, and we
Yeah.
scrape them off, and you continue this process. And so getting to the point of like turn up the heat, it can only help. And then you recognize that like it's not even that bad. Yo, and just to name too quickly, like the words that my wife used that so resonated with what you just said. She's like, yo, there
Yeah.
was a cloud around you and I couldn't name it, and you were steadily denying it, but it was there. And not only has it lifted and it's gone, but when you acknowledge it, it's weird. It's like you're
Yeah.
letting me know that you know that I'm not like off. That breeds trust. And this is in the context of marriage. And it's neat being a married person because like it's different. Like there's an element of it where like we've made this commitment. We're saying, hey, like this is for life. So there's an element of it like this is a cage match. Like you ain't going nowhere. Like
Big time.
it's like
Big time, man.
it's like it's weird. There's also like don't take it the wrong way and don't like take advantage of it. But there's a safety in that too
Yeah.
that says like, okay, I can let myself be seen and be known. And what I'll submit is that yeah, growth comes from that, not
Yeah.
distance. If you're with
Yeah.
someone that loves and cares about you and you're committed
Yeah.
to each other, growth comes from that. Connection,
Yeah.
intimacy comes from that.
Yeah.
Um, Not shame and fear
Yeah.
and disconnection
Yeah, man. We're not trying to escape the problems. We're trying to get better at them. And I love that.
together.
That's good. Yeah, exactly. Like, man, we could have a whole conversation just about marriage. Being married well, being married poorly. I know we've done it both. We've
Come
both
on,
done
hello.
both of them. So there's plenty to
Let's,
share.
yeah, man.
Um,
Let's set it up, bro.
we will. We will. That's a promise. Aaron, before we wrap up here, you do all kinds of good things. You're a really talented speaker and author, and you're in your niche in the world speaking really important message. So where can people follow and support your work?
So thank you so much for that. Thanks, doctor. Appreciate you. Yeah, you're doing some stuff out here too, man. I believe that everybody has like a destiny or purpose. A lot of times folks will look at that as maybe like a goal or an ambition, but in any event, there's a greatness inside of each one of us. I hold that belief near and dear to my heart. And I also recognize there's obstacles along the way, internal or external. And I'm just committed to carrying this message to folks that they have a choice how they respond to those issues. They can choose to grow. And in that they are growing to overcome the obstacles of their destiny, the obstacles of their dream. And so I wrote a book about it. This is kind of here. You can see part of it. It's called Take the Time It Takes. This wisdom that my mom shared with me. She said, if you take the time it takes, it will take less time. And so you can find this on Amazon. The easiest way is to probably type up Aaron P. Scott, like you see right there in my name, and it'll pretty much take you right to it. But I share about my life, some of the major setbacks that I experienced, from addiction to gun violence to growing up abusive home, but then sharing some principles that anyone can use to transform your thinking and help you get from where you are to where you want to be. And so that's available about personal development and spiritual formation. I am building a platform right now on TikTok, King underscore Thesum. That's like the name Thesum, but it does read like the sum. So King
Okay,
underscore the sum. So I just
got
roll
it.
with it. There's definitely some wordplay there too, but the platform there is teaching to build confidence, build self-control, and to build compassion. When we understand our ability to change our situations, that's a healthy confidence. The self-control to stay on the rails and work towards where we're trying to go, not get pulled
Yeah.
in a bunch of directions, and then to be compassionate with others while we do it. And also, I'll mention my wife's platform because we work together on there. It's the Mindful Mama. She's focusing on reaching women specifically during postpartum mental health
Yeah.
and
So
showing up the
important.
support. And it's been
Yep.
beautiful to share that journey with her. And
I
so,
love it.
if those are things that you're interested in, please connect with me, connect with us. We'd love to keep growing in that way. And I thank you for all the support and love.
Awesome. Awesome. Love it, Aaron. So grateful for the work you and your family are doing. It's so important. So grateful for your wife's work on the postpartum work. There's such a huge need. I was just talking to a friend yesterday who is going through it with her postpartum journey and just not getting enough support because it turns out she lives in the United States. So I'm gonna share your wife's page with her in particular when we get off this. So I just appreciate you naming it. Thank you for your honesty, for your story, for how deeply you are living and modeling this work. Thank you for modeling the work for all of us today. For me, I'm gonna come out of this conversation and I'm gonna go be a better dad because you and I spent some time together, not lying about the work it takes to stay accountable to our families. And so this is a model of men's work. This is the work we have to do as men to be safe and whole for our communities, support one another. So I'm just really grateful for this. For those watching, I hope you felt the courage and the clarity in this conversation. I hope it stirred something up in you. And this has been The Unspoken. I'm Michael Brasher, and I'll see you next time.